So it was Bridget, right?
Yes.
Bridget, you and I'm David, by the way.
Okay.
You and I are going to play a little game. And the name of this game is Follow the Leader.
Oh, gosh.
So, watch carefully, wait for the bell, and then act accordingly.
Okay.
Are you ready? Okay.
I'm not gonna act like a chicken or anything.
No. Just watch carefully, wait for the bell,
Okay.
act accordingly.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Here we go.
Whoa. Ring the bell. Okay. Go Bridget!
Maybe we should have done this after.
Not even good at cards, so. Oh no, Bridget, now you're in trouble. Okay, Bridget, you got this.
Good job, Bridget. Nice.
You're clumsy, okay. What do I do? Come on, Oh no!
Wait, what? Wait.
There it is. Okay.
Oh. I thought that was the trick.
Watch it.
I'm gonna lose my shit.
Bridget!
The magician. Thank you. I'll be here.
I'll be here all week. So, Emily, you and I are going to play a little game.
Okay.
And the name of this game is Follow the Leader. So, watch carefully, wait for the bell, and then act accordingly.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm a preschool teacher. Hopefully I can follow.
Oh, you'll be great at following directions then. Okay, here we go. So, watch carefully, wait for the bell, act accordingly.
Okay.
Here we go.
No idea what I'm looking at. Oh, she's not very good at this. Sorry, baby. All right, yeah, I got it. Oh, yeah, I got that. That's not for sure. I can't follow accordingly.
It's fine. Well done. Emily. Hi, I'm David Parr, and this is Copycat. First, some backstory. In January of 2016, I was hit by a car outside the airport in Chicago, and the result of that accident was that my leg was broken in 2 places. This is an x-ray of my leg from just after the surgery. You can see here, this is the main break right there at the top of my tibia bone. The other break was down here at the bottom, and this is the hardware they installed to hold my leg together. So I was out of commission for 3.5 months after the accident. I couldn't walk, I couldn't drive, and I couldn't do my show every week in Chicago. Now, I'm the kind of person who needs a creative outlet. If I do not have a creative outlet, I start to feel crazed. So to occupy my mind while I was stuck in the house for months on end, I decided to focus all my energy on developing one new piece of magic, something that I could perform when I recovered enough to return to the show. So that meant it had to be something I could perform sitting down, because at that point I would be on crutches. I couldn't put all my weight on my leg. So I started to cast around for an idea, somewhere to start, and my eyes immediately locked on this. This antique hotel desk bell had been on my shelf for years, and every once in a while over the years I would look at it and think, there has to be a way to work this into a magic piece. And I'd think about it for a few minutes, and then I'd give up and move on with my life. But after the accident, I had nothing but time on my hands. So I decided to seriously work on developing a routine around this bell. So as I was thinking about it, I thought, okay, how can I build something around this? What could I use the bell for? And surprisingly, the first idea I came up with had a lot of promise. I thought that if I could find an effect that was essentially turn-based, I could use the bell as the indicator for the end of a turn. And then it was, well, what magic effects are turn-based? And it occurred to me that you do as I do effects are turn-based. I perform an action, and then my assistant copies my action. So the you do as I do plot in magic has been around for ages. It's been explored by countless magicians. A lot of those routines are in print. In fact, the Encyclopedia of Card Tricks has an entire section devoted to just you do as I do effects. And it was in that book that I encountered an uncredited routine that was based on a very clever principle. And the principle was this: switching a playing card by using adhesive. Now, again, this is a principle that's been explored by many, many magicians, including myself. In my book, Brain Food, there's a routine called Werewolf that uses exactly that principle, switching a card using adhesive. But I had sort of forgotten about that principle, or I had lost sight of how versatile it can be. So once I was reminded of that, I decided that that was a good starting point for the next level of this. And normally, I have to admit, normally I would not get excited about routines that use 2 decks of playing cards. I think many of those types of effects are overcomplicated and convoluted, and so I tend to shy away from them. But in this case, I felt like I could streamline this and make the process very direct and clear, and most importantly, make it as game-like as possible. I felt that if I could make it into a game, it would be fun not only for the person who's helping me, but also for the audience to watch. And I think that's part of what made this so effective when I performed it on Fool Us. The back and forth game of it draws in the interest of my assistant and the people in the audience, and it tends to make people forget about trying to reverse engineer the method as the effect is going on. They're too caught up in the back and forth game of it. And after I performed this on Fool Us, Teller said to me, "You know what I loved about what you did? It was one simple, clear idea." And that was my goal with this. So in the next section, I'm going to teach you how to set up and perform Copycat. So this is the instructional section of Copycat. I will teach you how to set up and perform this. What you will need, besides a bell of some sort to indicate the end of a turn, is all of this. This is everything you need to set up and perform this. I have 2 decks of playing cards, one red and one blue. It's just important that they have different back colors so we can distinguish one deck from another. You'll need some rubber bands. I've color coordinated the rubber bands with my decks of playing cards because I'm using red and blue bicycle backs. This is a blue Sharpie marker. This will come in handy if you are using a blue back bicycle deck. But it might not be necessary. It's going to depend on your comfort level with this. I'll explain why that might be necessary later. This is a bone folder for creasing things, an X-Acto knife, a pair of scissors, a straight edge, and a cutting surface. This is a corner rounding punch, and this is a product called Scotch Removable Poster Tape. It's a double stick tape that is just adhesive enough to hold a poster onto a wall, but not too adhesive so that you can move the poster without damaging the poster or the wall it's stuck to. And I've used this stuff in quite a few different magic pieces. So that's everything you need to set this up. The first step is to take your decks and choose a force card. I tend to use a low spot card, like say the 2 of diamonds. And I'm going to turn this 2 of diamonds into a short card. I do this by placing it on my cutting surface, setting up the straight edge, so I will just take off a sliver of the short end of that card using the X-Acto knife. So I'm going to cut along here. Just a sliver of the card like that. Then I turn it around and set this up again and take a sliver off of this end as well. There we are, just a little sliver of that card. Now I have a short card, but the problem is it has these weird squared off corners now. So I need to correct that and bring the card back to its original appearance. I'm going to use a corner rounding punch for that. This is a punch that actually has 3 corner rounding punches built into it. I'm going to use the smallest one. That one is a 3 millimeter radius. A 3 millimeter radius is the exact size of the corner of a standard poker-sized playing card. So that's how I'm going to restore the corners to their original appearance. I put the corner of the card in and use my punch like that, and I'm going to do that to all 4 corners of the card like so. And that way I have a normal looking playing card. But now it is a short force card. I'm just taking off the little burrs of paper here. It's a short force card that I will use in my blue deck. I also want to take the red deck and remove the matching 2 of diamonds. Otherwise, the red deck is completely normal and unprepared. So, first I position the red-backed duplicate 2 of diamonds 5th from the bottom of the pack. So 5th from the bottom, there. Then I position the short force card 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 25, 26th from the top. So halfway down in the deck, that is where my short force card will be. Then I put a face card on the, I've positioned a face card on the face of the pack, and I use a piece of this removable poster tape on the face of that card. Now, this piece of tape does not have to be very large at all. I use a piece that's about 1 inch, which is about the size of the end of your finger. So about that, right? I position that right in the middle of that face card on the face of the pack and press it down thoroughly like this. Okay. Once I've done that, I can remove the protective backing from the tape, exposing the adhesive right there. Now, one little thing, before using this short force card, using an X-Acto knife to make a short card produces a sort of ridge along the edge of the card. I don't really want that ridge on there because it can sometimes interfere with cutting to that card. So I use a bone folder to press down on the edge, the short end of that card, and that just gets rid of that ridge that's created by using an X-Acto knife to cut it like that. Okay? So, one other thing with this, using a short card. If you're not accustomed to using a short card as a force card, and you're worried about being able to know when you've cut to the force card, you can mark it so that with a glance you can tell when you've cut to it. Now, I've done this so many hundreds of times, I know exactly when I have cut to that force card. I can just feel it. Running my thumb up the back edge of that deck, I can feel exactly when I've cut to that short force card. But if you're concerned about it, being able to check, what I do is I color in, use the blue Sharpie marker to color in the very center circle on the back of that bicycle card. Now you can see this is a card I've prepared already by coloring in that circle in the center. So, and when I cut to that, I can glance down and see if that mark is there. I know I've cut to my force card. I don't use that. I've just gotten used to not using it. I mainly got used to using that without a mark because I was going to perform it on Fool Us, and I didn't want one tiny hint as to what the method was, because my performance was going to be projected on a giant screen in Penn and Teller's theater, and I thought maybe they might spot a mark. So I did not use one, and now I'm very, very accustomed to being able to cut to that short card, like so. So, you know, it all depends on your comfort level, and you might use the mark on the back at first and then phase it out later once you become more comfortable. You know, part of my goal is that I need to be able to relax and enjoy my performance and just focus on having fun with people and connecting with them. And I can't do that if I'm super nervous about anything. So if I can do something that will help increase my comfort level, I will do that. I'll build a safety net or safety buffer into things, and that helps me relax and enjoy the process of performing. So I would urge you to do that if you feel nervous about whether or not you can cut to that force card. So now the decks are set up. Again, duplicate 2 of diamonds is 5th from the bottom. The short force card is 26th from the top. And my adhesive, removable adhesive tape is in the center of the card on the face of the deck. I snap my rubber bands around these. And now these are ready to go. I position the blue deck on my side near me and the red deck near my assistant. I get someone from the audience to come up and help me, and I explain what the procedure is. And that's really the key to performing this kind of stuff, where basically the method is largely hands-off. So it's very key that the person who's helping me, my onstage assistant, understands his or her role. Because if he or she does not, this whole thing could go off the rails. So my instructions have to be very explicit. And my instructions are this: you and I are going to play a little game. And the name of this game is Follow the Leader. So watch carefully, wait for the bell, and then act accordingly. Now, there's a reason why I use the phrase follow the leader, and that's because many of us have played that game when we were kids. And so we understand what it means. It means watch what this person does, wait for my turn, and then mimic that person's actions. So it was just the way to get my assistant up to speed with as few words as possible. So again, instructions. You and I are going to play a little game. The name of this game is Follow the Leader. So watch carefully, wait for the bell, and then act accordingly. Are you ready? And he says yes, and I say, here we go. I pick up my deck, the blue deck, I take the rubber band off, and I flick it off of my thumb, and then ring the bell. He does the same. Removes the rubber band, flicks it, rings the bell. I now pick up my deck, I fan it out, making sure not to fan it too far and reveal my setup on the bottom of the pack. I fan it out mostly the middle section of the deck and show the audience that all of the cards are different. It's important to establish that fact, that this is not the same card repeated over and over. So I show it to the audience, I show it to my assistant, and then I square it up and I ring the bell. Now, I immediately go to this position. I think of this as the rest position. It's the deck with the short end of the deck squared against the table, my index finger squaring the top of the pack, just like this, and the deck resting against the table. I want my audience to become accustomed to seeing this position, because later this is going to help me cut to my short force card. So as I am in rest position, my assistant picks up the deck and mimics my actions. Fans the pack out as best he can, shows it to the audience that all the cards are different, shows it to me, and then squares it up and rings the bell. Next, I go from this rest position. I always aim the top edge of the deck toward me. That will be important later when I'm cutting to that short card. So aim the top edge of the deck toward me, and now I position the pack for an overhand shuffle. And all I'm going to do is shuffle the top portion of the pack. So I run cards off of the top of the pack in clusters, taking care to not shuffle down halfway. I stop short of the halfway mark, basically, and then put all of the cards that are in my right hand back on the bottom of the pack. And I'm right back to where I was. My gaffed card with the adhesive on it is on the bottom of the pack. My duplicate 2 is still 5th from the bottom, and the short force card is still 26th from the top of the pack. Okay, so again, this is just an overhand shuffle of the top portion of the deck, and I just shuffle some clusters of cards off and then put the rest of the cards back on the bottom. And then I ring the bell. And as my assistant is copying my actions, I return to this rest position with the short edge of the pack squared against and resting on the table surface. What this does is it causes the short card to fall down against the table surface. And that will make it easier for me to cut to it in a moment. So, my assistant shuffles the cards as best he can, then rings the bell. Now, I go from the rest position, like this. Again, I aim that top edge of the deck toward me, and now I cut off about a quarter of the cards, right? I don't cut to my short card yet. I put them on the table, ring the bell. My assistant does the same. rings the bell. Now, all I have to do is run my thumb off the rear, up the rear edge of that deck. I can feel exactly when I've cut to that short force card right there. So just cut to it there, cut that portion of the deck onto the pile. My assistant does, and I ring the bell. My assistant does the same. Now, I am going to place the card, the force card, on the top of his tabled packet. But I don't want to just do it casually like this, because I don't want my assistant to accidentally flash the face of this card as he's placing it onto my table packet. So I want him to copy my actions. So I'm going to model exactly what I want him to do. And that's this. I move my hand over near the tabled packet. Now I transfer the top card onto his packet, and then I ring the bell. So my assistant mimics my actions, brings the packet over here, deals a card on top, like so, and then rings the bell. Once that's done, I just take the remainder of the pack, drop it on top, and square it up. Ring the bell. My assistant does the same. Then I am going to use one hand to pick up this deck and give it to my assistant. First, I want to square it up. So I pick it up and I square it with the long edge against the table surface and my index finger on the other long edge, like this. Then I keep my index finger there on the top so I can transfer my grip, so I'm holding the pack between my thumb and fingers. I pick up the pack, and then in the larger action of making an arc like this to hand the deck to my assistant, I squeeze between my fingers. I squeeze the deck between my fingers. So again, I pick up the deck, square it against the table like this, change my grip so that it's held between my thumb and fingers, pick up the deck, and then in the larger action, squeeze those cards together. That causes that gaffed card with the adhesive on it to stick to the card that with the odd colored back, right? So if my assistant doesn't immediately get the point that he's supposed to take this deck from me, I just kind of shake the deck in front of him until he gets the point. Oh, I'm supposed to take that. So he takes the deck from me, and I ring the bell. Now my assistant copies my action, squares up the deck, picks it up, hands it to me, and rings the bell. Now, I always flash the bottom card of the pack to the audience because it's just another reinforcement that the cards are all different. And then I ribbon spread the deck face down on the table and find the odd colored card. I point to it and then push it out of the deck forward, then sort of neaten these up, but don't square them completely, and ring the bell. My assistant mimics my actions, ribbon spreading the pack, finding the odd colored card. Now this is the duplicate of the force card. And that's the beauty of that switch. It's hands off. So my assistant pushes the odd colored card forward, sort of neatens these up, rings the bell. I pick up the blue back card, show it to my assistant, and then show it to the rest of the audience and ring the bell. I keep the card right up here near my face so it's visible, and now my assistant picks up the red back card, looks at it, and the audience is going to see my assistant react. They're going to see the expression of surprise on his face as he looks at this card. And then I might have to remind my assistant, because he's caught up in the surprise of this, I might have to remind him to show the audience. So what I do is I point to the audience and he gets the idea. Oh, show this to everybody. And now we're in this position and this is a clear applause cue. The audience begins applauding. And that is copycat. Now I'll share with you some tips for performing copycat. And these are things I've learned as I've performed this hundreds of times. One of them is that through use, eventually these decks will start to become worn, and it will be harder and harder for you to cut to that short card, the force card. The deck will just start to get gnarly and dirty, and eventually it'll become difficult. You know, cards will become bent or whatever, and it'll start to get harder to hit that force card by running your thumb up the rear edge of the pack. And so I recommend replacing these with fresh decks, like every couple of months, maybe, like depending on how often you do this. Now, I've been performing this in the show in Chicago every week, so about every month or so, I replace these decks with 2 fresh decks. And that just gives me the confidence of knowing that I'm going to be able to cut to that force card very easily with minimal effort. Also, through use, the adhesive on this gaffed card with the adhesive on the face, that removable poster tape, the adhesive will wear down, and eventually it will lose its stickiness. And if it loses its stickiness almost completely, that could lead to a disaster in which, when the pack is ribbon spread, there will be 2 red-backed cards in it. Don't want that to happen. So my advice is also to get in the habit of, when you switch to fresh decks, or before you switch to a fresh deck, replace the tape. I replace it like every, I don't know, maybe 5 performances or so. I'll switch in, I'll just cut a new piece of tape and I'll peel this old one off and apply the new piece of tape on there. And that way, again, I have the confidence of knowing that a disaster is not going to happen. Again, part of this is just knowing what my comfort level is and knowing what makes me nervous. And that's also part of the reason why I've positioned the duplicate of the force card 5th from the bottom. The effect would work just as easily with the duplicate of the force card just above the gaffed card with the adhesive on it, but that means when it's ribbon spread, the double card is right next to the duplicate force card, and that would make me nervous. So I've put a little safety buffer in there just for my own comfort and peace of mind. I want to be able to relax and enjoy my performance. That's part of my goal as a performer. So that way I can concentrate on communicating with people, connecting with them. So that's just another little safety measure I've built in there. Also, this was something that came up, and I never would have anticipated this. But it's one of those things that you learn in performance. I was doing the show in Chicago, and I got a guy up from the audience to help me be my assistant on stage for this piece. And we went through the whole first part of the routine, and we got up to the part where we had exchanged packs, and I ribbon spread mine and pushed the odd card out. Pushed the odd card out like that, and so he did the same, ribbon spread the pack, and then he just pushed a random card out like that. And I looked at him and I pushed the card back and I gestured for him to do it again. And so he pushed another random card out of the pack. And I thought, okay, is he just messing with me? Is that what's going on here? So I pushed the card back and I gestured again, and this time I pointed right at the odd-colored card. And at that point, he realized what was happening, and he said, "Oh, I'm colorblind." I never anticipated that this would be an issue. But a significant portion of the male population has red-green color blindness. And apparently, red and blue decks are close enough to red-green that he couldn't see the odd card unless he really focused on it. So once I pointed out to him and he realized what was going wrong, he could see the odd-backed card and he pushed it out. So from that time on, I have always brought a woman up from the audience to help me out, because only 0.5% of the female population has red-green color blindness because it's carried on the X chromosome. So my chances are much better that I'm not going to have to deal with that possibility if I get a woman from the audience. I'm also extra careful. I find someone in the audience and I say to her, "Are you among the 0.5% of women who are colorblind?" And so far, in the hundreds of times I've performed this, she's always said no, and I say, "You'll be perfect for this." And I get her up from the audience to help me. So I would suggest that you do what I've done. I mean, the other way you could deal with this is if you don't use red and blue bicycle decks, if you say use the decks you can get on the internet that are like a solid colored back, I would use maybe a yellow deck and a blue deck. I think even if you have red-green color blindness, the difference in tone of those two backs, a person who is red-green colorblind would still be able to spot the tonal difference and push out the odd colored card. So that's another way you might approach it. But I've found that just simply asking a woman to help me out and making sure that she's not colorblind, because a small portion of the female population does indeed have red-green color blindness, but it's a very small segment in comparison to men. So when I did this on Fool Us, before I flew out to Las Vegas, I said to the producers of Penn and Teller Fool Us, "Please do me a favor, just this one thing. Ask if Allison Hannigan, the host of the show, is colorblind." And they assured me that she was not. So I was good to go. And so, that's part of the evolution that happens when you perform magic in front of an audience. You're going to learn lessons that you could not have learned otherwise. And I never even considered that color blindness would be a problem until I dealt with that problem on stage. So now I'm prepared and I know how to avoid it. Okay, I have one more tip for performing copycat. If you happen to be performing in a place where there's high humidity or you're traveling to a place where there's going to be a massive temperature change or a change in humidity. For instance, when I traveled from Chicago to Las Vegas to perform this on Fool Us, I suggest that you use a card clip to store the decks in when you're not performing this. And the reason is a massive temperature change or change in humidity can cause the decks to warp. And you'll end up in a situation where the deck is concave, and as you cut cards off of here, the packet will keep popping from concave to convex. And if that happens, it can be very difficult to cut to that short force card. And this actually happened to me once, and that's how I learned this lesson. So thereafter, I always store these decks. I put the decks back in the box, and I put the box into a card clip for both of these decks. And that keeps the deck flat so you don't get that warping problem that can make it difficult for you to cut to the short force card. Another little tip. So those are just a few tips for you in performing copycat. I hope you have fun doing this routine. I've had a lot of fun with it. And if you do enjoy working with copycat, I urge you to please post a review on Penguin Magic. That will help other people who might be interested in this effect find it. So thanks for purchasing Copycat, and I hope to see you again soon.